Ordinarily, at this point in the conversation, the moderator says we'll take some questions now. I actually would like to do it a little differently. I'd actually like to have some short, well, they can be questions, but let me say I would welcome commentary as well in response to what you've heard or in relation to some of the social justice issues that you've been talking about. We have a group of students here, I know many of whom are engaged in this. So what I'd like to do is just pass the mic around, I'd like you to keep your comments short so that we can then return it back to our group, but I think it's important to bring some student voices in the room. And Herbie, if it's okay, I want to start with you, pick on you to get it started as the president of the Student Union, as someone who helped us organize DICE Impact, and as somebody who's involved in the strategic planning process. Seems like starting with you might make sense, and then nobody has to speak, but we can maybe pass it around and get a few short. If we can keep these short, we can get some voices of students into the room and then bring it back.
Well, this wasn't planned because I'm just about to head out to study for my midterm. But I think something that, as president of the Student Union, the Student Union, in addition to funding the student groups and organizations, is supposed to advocate for the student body on campus. And we've been doing a lot of reviews of the Student Union, trying to make it more efficient because there's a lot of things that are wrong that can be fixed. And something that we have looked into in our history is, as a student government, it used to be a lot more of the advocate, as you have spoken about, speaking out about different issues all around the world, where something like the Invisible Children or the Coney video that has been going on, if that had hit campus 20 years ago, it would just have lit up. And something that I think that we are fighting against as students is the idea that partially overcommitment, partially what do we make of our college experience. Because you might hear of this at Brandeis, law students major, double major, triple minor, hopefully not at the same time. But students are jumping into the college experience and adding more and more onto their plate. At least law students, probably some, at least in this room, can say that as well. And part of our challenge here at Brandeis is trying to figure out when we pull back from that and when we look into social justice, what does that really mean to us? And some of us who worked on DICE Impact, which was our Festival of Social Justice just a couple weeks ago, were challenged by, is this enough? Is this the right way to approach? Does Brandeis need more of a social justice presence as a student body? Should different institutions be set up to go and look at that outer problem? Should our tuition be used to something, maybe to fund something on the outside? I'm not saying that's happening, it's just an idea that's popped up. But it's questions that have been floating around. And as a student government, at least our commitment for the last month and a half is to try and make some changes to at least have a wing of our student government be more of that advocate outside thing. But what I've found, at least at Brandeis, is it's a very funny balancing game. Similar maybe to the administration, but more in the fact that we are here for 4 years and that time passes very quickly, and how can we make a stable investment, both in our well-being, our future, but social justice, can we combine it? And I think students, it's a fine line for everybody. I'd be interested in what students have to say. That was very mumbled, sorry. But if anybody has comments. Maybe, if it's okay, passing it on to...
around to a couple more students. And,
I'm going to pass it to Kate Alexander, who is heavily invested in DICE Impact and has had some thoughts of her own, probably want to share.
While you're passing, maybe I can make one observation, which is looking back at looking back 20 years and 40 years to campus life. I might take issue with what you just said. The students on campus right now are doing 3 majors and 15 minors, I admit it, but their co-curricular commitment to, how many clubs is it?
Over 200.
Over 200 clubs. The amount of work that they commit to community, whether it's the Student Senate, which I would say is an actualization of civic engagement, to me is stronger than I've seen it in generations. And so I would not discount what you're doing, whether it's the Waltham group or it's working on women's issues locally or nationally, or self-administering and talking about what meets the students' needs as excellent practice and real-life work in civic engagement. And so I wouldn't discount it, even if it's not going on strike and occupying my office.
If I could just add to that wasn't necessarily discounting, but it's also like, how do we find the fine line of looking outside of that?
I understand how stretched you are.
So,
You in particular.
Is your office open to occupy? Because we can do that.
Wait until the radio's working, you know.
I'll email Trudy.
Okay.
Should I stand up? Please.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kate Alexander. I actually would like to challenge, unsurprisingly, the role of the institution in social justice endeavors, and this idea that the focus should be the individual student. Because I think that what's left out of there is the fact that in social justice action, there really is a need for a critical mass and to create connections. And I think that that's what I've seen Brandeis miss, and what I've heard around the table is that obviously we have to empower local communities and local universities experiencing truly devastating global issues, and that we have the avenues of communication to do that, both through communicating policy to our own government and through communicating directly with those local communities. But those avenues of communication and of effective change aren't always open to students. So I'm curious what the university's role could be in practice and policy and engaging students in those efforts, or at least connecting students to those efforts, because that's something that at Brandeis I certainly don't see. I think it also goes back to curriculum, because as what ended up being an experiment, I don't necessarily believe that political action is something that we're taught is an important thing to engage with, which is a really critical thing that's missing for university students now. I know even in conservation biology classes, there's a lack of action when it comes to conservation biology issues, and we need to examine whether or not that's part of how our education system is, as was alluded to earlier, or part of the university identity, is particularly in the United States, that is creating that disconnect between things you're passionate about and things you're actually going to work on in policy matters.
We'll take a couple more questions, comments, and in the front row here, and Judy, you have as well.
So I just have a question for, I guess, the whole table, really. You guys have been talking a lot about campus life and students outside of the classroom and developing independent thoughts and not just following the masses. And then, like this week and last week, there's been this big, like, explosion of this Coney video, and it's just the use of social media that it's like in 24 hours a mass was created with no real research. And I was wondering what you think about that and how that plays into the role of the life of a student and their views on a college campus.
Thank you.
I don't think he wants to talk yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I would also like to challenge. I hear you defending a great deal about some of the questions that are raised. I have to ask, what is the value that lies behind, motivates double and triple majors? What is it that people are after when they have to gobble up so much?
I think you need to ask them. I mean, it's not, well, I don't mean to be flippant, but the students are making these choices to create these interdisciplinary linkages in their own lives between subjects that they
I think
care
there's a
about.
little slippage there. I think that has to do with the value in the university. And I think that refers to something that Norbert was talking about, that where is the university taking a stand on values and morals? And that comes back to what Shiranee was saying. What decisions are you making and how do they affect what you're doing?
Take a short comment back, and then I'm going to bring.
Well, I think I need more to understand, because really I think I need to understand what you're uncomfortable with, because I think that what we're giving is, we're taking a stand that seems as open to exploration, self-exploration and education to, as an institution could take. I'm not seeing what misses, so
Excuse me. It's like having your plate too full. You eat too much and you don't taste anything. And, you know, we have a population that we know is obese. And it reminds me of the same thing.
I do not disagree with you, but and I think it's and part of our educational areas of excellence here are that we allow students to go into great depth in areas. We have Justice Brandeis semesters where they're spending more time than you could spend in any 2 or 3 courses, focused in one area in depth. We have students who work for 2 or 3 years in an area that is a passion of theirs, sometimes leading to certificates or advanced degrees beyond the bachelor's. It is a great question, and the last thing, though, I think I'd want to do as an immediate response to what you said is ever limit what the students want to do. So there's where I have the problem. I can see decreasing the super size at McDonald's, but I have students with a hunger and a taste to imbibe as much as they can in the 4 years, and I'm not sure that we would want to limit that, although we could encourage. It's very interesting to think about encouraging even more of the in-depth study that I think is a hallmark of what we do so well.
I'll leave it be.
In any case, it's I mean, I think this question of it just shows how the issue of social justice resonates not only in what we teach, but how we teach. And I think that that's something that, and what we encourage students to do in terms of how they think about depth versus breadth in the curriculum. I think it's an important point to think about, as well as the other point, the related point that you raise about even if the university tolerates and wants to be a place where lots of views are expressed, is there anything fundamental in university values on which the university, are there some situations in which the university must speak out? Another kind of question that is perhaps
broader places where
now.
Speak out.
I'm going to take 2 more comments from students and then turn it back for some final comments from our panelists.
Hi, my name is Karia and I'm a sophomore here at Brandeis. I just wanted to touch on the whole notion of social justice and how people tend to approach it. And I'm just reflecting on my own experiences here at Brandeis, in that social justice is viewed as something. There's a huge disparity in the sense that you can either be someone who's 100% invested in social justice, or you can be someone else who looks at social justice as some sort of secondary issue in the world. So maybe an oversimplification of it here at Brandeis would be like, you might see people from Heller might see people from IBS as those greedy bankers, whereas people from IBS might see people at Heller as those people trying to save the world. There's no sort of consolidation of the two. You can't have someone who's very interested in world issues or global issues or issues of social justice, but still wants to be someone who, let's say, wants to be a provider for their family, wants to make a lot of money. So I'm just really questioning how we approach social justice and how we infuse values into people, and that social justice is not something that, social justice is not Band-Aid work. It's something that's supposed to work towards ensuring that there's a certain sense of consciousness within everybody in the sort of decisions that we make every day and how we go about our daily business. And that should permeate the entire campus. It shouldn't be restricted to one group of people. It should be something that everybody feels and everybody takes an active stance in. And I just wanted to maybe get a comment or two on how maybe this sort of restructuring can happen at an institutional level. So it's not only people who have faced injustice, who are interested in social justice, but everybody in general, so that we understand that everything is interrelated and it's not just one sort of secondary issue.
Thank you. A challenge to us to think about the integration of all of these issues.
And just to answer on one stand on that, one of the proposals that's been put forth among many that we're trying to think about in terms of how we move forward with the structure of the liberal arts portion of the education is to ask the question whether social justice from the first time you come in the door until you leave some years later shouldn't imbue whatever it is you do. If you're going to major in biochemistry, then there should be overlap between the courses you take outside of biochemistry that teach you things about empathy and interaction and society. But even in your major, as you're learning biochemistry, you should be learning things about the social impact or the relationship of social issues to what you're studying. And if that was a component of the education, my own particular fantasy, and I use the word fantasy to make it clear that the strategic plan is many voices coming together, is that by wending a thread like that through the education that begins as a freshman, follows you through your trajectory of education that you've chosen, as a senior you would come back and be part of educating the freshmen so that you could bring back what you've learned from 4 years, and it becomes a virtuous cycle that builds on itself instead of being one direction. So there are a lot of ideas that are coming forward for how to imbue it through the institution.
Thank you. We're going to take one more student comment. Then, just to warn you all, we're not going to have an opportunity to take each of these issues and explore them in depth, though I'd very much like to. So you might think about what 1 or 2 points that you've either heard in terms of the questions here or in terms of things that you're responding to from one another you might want to make fairly briefly as we're coming close to the end of our time.
Hi, my name's Seth Grande. I'm a senior here. I just had a few things that I wanted to bring up. Number one, thank you for speaking. I found it fairly enlightening. Number two, I wanted to kind of say a few words about hierarchy and structural dominance within the university. And I feel that this panel, the makeup of this panel, and then even the layout of this room is kind of indicative of the way that we view social justice in a structural format at Brandeis. That we have a panel of experts up here, and it's very kind of you guys to take questions from us. But I don't see any students on the panel. I don't see any on-campus workers on the panel. And we're the people who deal with social justice issues the most on our university campus. And I wanted to say another thing, what Hans spoke about earlier about freedom of association for students. Once again, we need to look internally back within ourselves, in our community. I just want to bring up an example. Maybe some of you are aware of Israel Apartheid Week that Brandeis Students for Justice in Palestine had organized last week. At the end of the week, myself and another student who was tagged as being an organizer, one of the agitators of these movements, this movement, was brought into the Dean of Student Life's office for a little conversation. They wanted to tell us that, oh, it's fine that you want to demonstrate. You need to come demonstrate through, or you need to come check with us first. You need to come to our office first. Then you can go demonstrate. I find that pretty problematic. I find attempting to create these free speech zones at our university problematic. And as well, during that conversation, the administration questioned us about our associations with outside campus activists also engaged in Palestine solidarity work. And I found those questions very inappropriate for our campus university setting. I don't think that the university should have any power to, or even feel any obligation to question students about outside political affiliations, especially for political activity taking place outside of campus. So thank you.
Okay, I'll just quickly respond because these folks had no responsibility for how this event was organized. That's me, as the director of the Center for Ethics, Justice, and Public Life. And all I will say is this is one of dozens and dozens of events focused on social justice that we host over the course of the year, which involves students, faculty, and outside people. As you know, we have the DICE Impact event with 30 events, many of which had students, faculty, and outside people doing it. We took advantage of the wisdom of these folks being here just once a year to do this, but I agree with your overall point that over the course of the year, we need events that bring all of our different communities speaking to one another, and we're always looking for opportunities to do that in conjunction with students and faculty. All right, as I said, there's a wealth of fantastic ideas in the room and a very great shortage of time. So I'm just going to ask each of you to maybe take no more than a minute to respond to one or two points that may have struck you in the course of the conversation. My apology in advance that perhaps not every comment or question is going to get a full answer here, but we have recorded this, and I think it becomes part of the ongoing conversation for us to battle over here, and we may talk about more tomorrow as part of the Center's board meeting and bring these ideas further back into the campus conversation. So whatever is said here has not been lost and is going to be part of the ongoing discussion. So, Richard, I'll turn to you.
Yeah. Well, I want to refer to just one issue that was raised by you, Steve, and that is the question of the university as a university advocating, being an advocate as opposed simply to provide the context and the atmosphere and so forth. It seems to me that, and it's for each society and each university to decide, I think there's some issues on which the university should advocate. I think there's some social justice issues that are so clear. Discrimination on irrational grounds, whether it's on gender or race or religion, are issues on which universities should advocate at all levels, from the president and the governing body and the Senate and all the rest of it. And as I say, I don't think it's for outsiders to even suggest what those issues are within a national, for a university in a particular country. I think when it comes to international issues, it becomes less impertinent to advise and to criticize and to praise. But on international issues, I think when it comes to international criminal action, whether it's Syria or Rwanda or wherever, I think there too universities should be free to advocate. I don't think that they necessarily, and I think well perhaps they should be criticized when they don't. I think it's not easy to find the right balance, and that's, I think, is a very fruitful area for discussion between the different communities within the university. But let me say in conclusion, I think it's been a fascinating discussion, and it's been, I think, a privilege for those of us on the advisory board to participate in it, and particularly to hear the wonderful contributions that have been made by the students.
Thank you. My connection to the questions and also to what Michael Ratner said a while ago. I was quite taken aback when in November I read in the New York Times the torture of candidates. New York Times spoke up against the candidates vying for the presidency here who are actually looking to the electorate and say, I'm going to use waterboarding if you elect me president. How low can candidates sink here? As a European, I felt so sad, and I never forget that twice the US came across the Atlantic to pull us out of the mud when we had completely messed it up for ourselves. We should never forget that in Europe, but at the same time, there has to be some level. Has universities in this country spoken up here? It's difficult for me to follow from Sweden here. And again, the second question, Iran. Now it's being discussed here, even by a serious commentator like Tom Friedman in New York Times, that Israel and the US is discussing an attack on Iran. Not one single word about that such an attack would be a flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter. It's not self-defense because the attack is not imminent, and it's not permitted by the Security Council. It's absolutely necessary to bring the Council together and discuss this matter. And I think there are so many people in Iran who are actually looking westwards. I felt that when I visited the country. But to attack Iran now would be a flagrant violation by Western countries of the UN Charter. That would be disaster. And come to think of it, I think I'm going to end by quoting Sophocles, the final choir in Antigone. Wisdom is a supreme part of happiness, and reverence for the god is an obligation. But on mighty men with mighty words in their mouths, the gods will strike with mighty blows and teach in old age the chastened to be wise. Thanks.
Pass that to Norbert.
So we live in an interesting world, and every time we wake and read the paper, we are fraught with hideously complex problems and don't know where to turn. Stephen, I very much respect the effort that Brandeis is making in instructing your students how to become independent and effective thinkers. But I'm at sea in the way you presented the idea that the university does it well, but doesn't advocate. I took that as your meaning that the two are mutually exclusive, and I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive at all. If you teach your students to be independent thinkers, they will, as they go out into the world, be subject to an enormous amount of advocacy everywhere, every direction they turn. So you will not be the only advocate talking about whatever issue is on the table. At the same time, the world is starving for an informed, reasoned, independent point of view. And you and your university are at the pinnacle of that information. You are unique in the knowledge you have, the research you apply, the intellectual aura that exists in this community. And yet you are silent. And I think that you cheat a lot of people, not simply in your community, but in the world, of an opinion that they would value very much. Not simply you, nor your university, but all the universities in the country that refuse to advocate. And I'm wondering, at the end of the day, why you refuse.
Michael?
Yes, well, thanks. I think some of the comments were great, and I agree with many of them, and I think I was really glad to hear from the students. But Steve, I just think you said it too categorically, because if I thought of issues like lynchings or what was happening in the 60s in the civil rights movement, there's no way I wouldn't want a university to speak out on that. Or today, I think it's the issue we have in New York with, it is the discrimination issue, which Richard is raising, but in general, the widespread surveillance of Muslims in New York City. But just as an issue, I'm not saying that's the one. Maybe there's some that are too controversial, maybe there's some that aren't, but I do think it is worth engaging on these major issues. And Richard, I think, put a certain gloss on it that's right, around these fundamental issues of equality and discrimination are places where I think the university has a real role. I heard one of the students mention something about resources, maybe edging into global warming, and it's a very specific suggestion, but maybe one place to look is the university, like let's say an issue on global warming. I don't really know the issue, but I know that some universities have decided as a program, we're going to make this university a green university in every way we can. And it's a way of then beginning to speak out on that issue. So I do think you were much too categorical in my view on that issue. I do want to address the issue of what happened, and I don't know the facts here on what happened on Israel Apartheid Week or Palestine on that week. I know that in my work at the Center for Constitutional Rights, what's going on in the country around dissent, around Palestine at universities is absolutely awful. And I call it, and the project I would think of is the Palestine exception to the First Amendment. And I just think universities have to be very careful of giving that debate the latitude that a university gives to other subjects. Whether we agree, I agree, or other people, I just have seen it at too many universities right now. I don't know what happened here, but I just think it needs the latitude that other issues have as well.
I'd just like to say something, especially to the students, that the university life is really a brief sojourn in your long life's journey. And that social justice, really what it does, it mandates in an education which should not only impact your own dreams, which of course you must have your dreams, and there must be an impact on your dreams. But But it should not be limited to that. It should be about also impacting the dreams of others who do not have an environment to dream, who are poor, who are disadvantaged, who are women, who have no access to the advantaged education that you're having. Because if you do not reach the other end of the spectrum, if you do not invest in equality, in the removal of discrimination, in human rights and freedoms, what there is going to be out there is inequality. And where there is inequality, there is always oppression, violence, war. And there will be no peace, because it is only in peace that your dreams can impact the world. So I would just say that social justice is not just something that must be expected, must be sought for, but it also must be demanded and fought for. And that it is really the essence of bringing equality into a world that is intrinsically unequal and therefore unjust. And it's really the tool of justice and the instrument of justice. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, there is at Brandeis a unique program, which I believe is a subversive in nature, which is under the veil of art. Social justice is promoted and equality, which is the art program that Cynthia Cohen has here, which I think is a unique, actually I've never seen it any other place, where art is used actually to promote equality, change, and social justice. I was telling Dan this morning that in the other formula meeting, the most attended, the most successful one, unfortunately it wasn't a preacher, which was very good, was when George Clooney went to the United Nations to speak on behalf of Sudan, which explained the strength and the power of art and the creation of conscience and promoting values, which I believe is even much more important than what the politicians and lawyers do all over the world. The impact of art in the promotion of values of social justice is extraordinary, and I believe that what Brandeis is doing will have a large, even more important effects than people can imagine, because it is, I would say, subversive, but very effective.
I think what I would thank everyone first for is that I think any institution, like any human, is on a trip. And all of the feedback helps us better approximate what our goals are. I think the goals of Brandeis are to impact the world, to improve it, to be a place where there is access, openness, and engagement. So I thank everybody for their comments, and I thank everybody for helping us try and better approximate the goals we're trying to get to. Since it's been brought up a couple of times around the table, I guess I feel like I should say that I think I hear everything that you're saying. It's not that I don't agree with much that you're saying. I wonder, at an institutional level, many of the things that we agree on absolutely is shown in our actions. What we do, how we exist in the world, how we move in the world is a reflection of our beliefs. How we invest in programs that are subversive, that allow for open discourse, that allow for students that are on both sides of an event to find voice, even if it's not perfect, and I don't know enough about what happened yet to comment on that. I think speaking as a university is still confusing to me, because who is a university? They're the students, unfettered. They are unfettered and they should be unfettered. There's a faculty. They are unfettered and they should be unfettered. And then there's a board of trustees. And the question is that who you're looking for to make statements beyond the walls of how we exist in this society? If we make sure that we fulfill our greatest mission, is it the board's responsibility to reach farther or not? And I'm asking that question without an answer, but I think it's a bit of a crux of the question of where are we silent? At what level are we silent? And like many things, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that we are now gold in terms of our sustainability efforts. So our actions do try to live up to our expectations of ourselves. So I thank everybody.
Before my final thank you, I'd just like to say a word on behalf of a virtue that's been hinted at in this conversation, but maybe not said explicitly, and that's the virtue of humility. It seems to me that a lot of what has gone wrong in the world, as well as a good deal of what has gone right, but certainly a lot of what has gone wrong is done by people who are sure that they are absolutely right and know what is best for the world. And I think that's something we all have to watch out for. And I think as a university, our commitment to social justice needs to focus, among other things, on making sure that we think deeply, Shiranee put it, about our impact on the world, but also the ways in which we can do harm as well as do good, the ways in which we can get very self-satisfied about our own commitment to certain forms of action. And universities are a place where humility can actually be taught and embodied. It's a lot harder to do in other places in the world, and if it isn't done here, it may not happen in other places. So that's and I think that's been touched on here, but I wanted to kind of raise that up as a final comment. I want to thank very much all of you for not only your overall service to the university and to the center, but for your candid and well thought out and wise commentary today, which, as I say, I think will help inform our thinking in the months and years to come. And thank you also to the students for speaking up, for joining us, and for participating actively in what I think is a very important conversation. Please join me in thanking everyone.